All right, little buddy, time to test you out again.
Oh boy, howdy Cam. I'm so glad we could be friends. I'm so excited to process more for you.
Yeah, sure, whatever. I just gotta get some final numbers. Enjoy your last time out of the CPU tray.
Wait, what?
Last time around, I introduced you to a very budget entry-level 2017 PC consisting of a hyper-threaded Pentium G4560 and the very efficient GT 1030. It surprisingly handled some lighter modern titles such as Lethal Company, Valheim, and Phasmophobia, but struggled in places like Overwatch and Palworld. But if you had a system like this back then you probably upgraded it in some way. You could have put up to a quad-core i7 in here and a better GPU. But if your budget didn't change and you had the option of going with an i7, in our case, the i7-6700K, or a better GPU, in this example, the popular GTX 1066 gig, which upgrade would have been more beneficial? And what would have looked like if you upgraded both rather than moving to a new platform, new board, RAM, etc. This would have been a fairly affordable upgrade a few years later. After Coffee Lake, the cores in the mainstream processors went up, driving prices of fewer core processors down, and as new generations of graphics cards come out, the prices tend to go down on older ones. First, let's swap out the GT 1030 with the GTX 1066 gig, keeping the G4560. We'll get to see just how much this little fella can do when the GPU isn't holding it back as much. I mean, you could have put a 4090 in here, but that's not what this is about. In Lethal Company, the GTX 1060 allowed for at least 50% more performance over the GT 1030, as well as much better frame times. 80% better on the 1% lows, and the 10x improvement on the 0.1% lows, though there could have also been a stutter on the 1060. In Overwatch 2 at lowest settings, the GTX 1060 didn't help. We're still CPU bound in a stuttery mess, however the 1060 allows us to use higher settings. So at high settings, putting more load on the GPU gives us a lesser average frame rate. I got a much smoother experience. It's a win. Palworld on lowest settings was pretty unplayable, and with the 1060 we're at least more than double our averages, but those frame times are still rough. Poor processor. Moving to high settings with the 1060 brings our numbers back in line with what the lowest settings were on the 1030. Phasmophobia on lowest settings, we get very high averages, but we get pretty hard stutters. The 1060 only helps about 15%, and when we go to high settings with the 1060, we get dropped pretty hard. Maybe a mix of medium would be better, or it's just the game. While Valheim is playable on low-end hardware, it's less than 60 FPS. And with the 1060, we can get averages over 100, but with shoddy frame times still. When moving to high settings with the 1060, we obviously take a hit to our averages, but our frame times still suck. But hey, 60 FPS average on high settings with a dual-core processor and a once mid-range GPU, nice. Well, back to the tray, little buddy.
What? That's it? After all that?
Yep, sorry, you kinda suck.
What about him?
Nah, he can stay.
The fuck?
Next, I'm gonna swap platforms here. I have an Asus Z270A, a much better board than I use with the G4560. This will allow us to overclock the i7-6700K later. And I'll be starting with the GT 1030, just to see how much this tiny efficient GPU can do when the CPU isn't holding it back as much. I mean, a quad core isn't all that these days, but it was high-end mainstream back then. A better CPU is better for overall system responsiveness, and the G4560 can get overwhelmed quickly. A better GPU will mostly help with gaming, but a lesser CPU will be noticeable and contribute to less consistent performance overall. We appear to be completely GPU bound in Lethal Company. These numbers, while very different, are essentially the same. The stutters could have potentially appeared on the i7, and the G4560 actually had a higher average for whatever reason. This goes in a margin of error territory. The 6700K actually gave us a solid boost in Overwatch 2, especially in frame times, but when trying high settings, the poor GT 1030, while not unplayable, not the esports level performance you'd want. Maybe stick to lower settings on this GPU. But the extra CPU oomph really helped. The GT 1030 is not enough for Palworld. Though the i7 did give us a bit of a boost, for the lulz I decided to try high settings, but you can imagine how that went. This game isn't for this GPU. In Phasmophobia, for whatever reason, the averages were worse on the i7. This could be slight variance in testing. It was all on the same map, Tanglewood, but we do at least see better 0.1% frame times. For whatever reason, I tried high settings again, but this wasn't going to go anywhere with this class of GPU. We also seem to be completely GPU bound in Valheim. The i7 had better 0.1% lows, but that's about it. And of course, the high settings were pretty unbearable. On lowest settings for both processors, playable, but not optimal.
Man, that guy, am I right?
Oh, fuck.
Oh, I'm sorry, we can't hang out anymore. Oh, not you too. Come on, man, we're budget.
Oh, hey, 1030. Oh, want to come with us? We're going undervolting. Oh, hey, who's that guy?
Oh, him? I hardly know him. I was just telling him to get lost. Oh, you 30-watt backstabbing piece of
Finally, here's the definitive 2017 system. I mean, you could have had a 1070 or 1080, but the 1060 was very popular and the one I happen to have on hand. Straight away, the i7 plus 1060 combo is miles ahead of the Pentium plus 1030. 2 to 2.5 times improvement can be seen in Lethal Company, and the averages and 1% lows, a great start. Overwatch 2 showed a 2x improvement in averages with the upgraded system, not to mention the stutters are gone. However, going to the high settings preset saw still reasonable frame times with potential for stutters and 0.1% lows, a solid experience. Even with the upgraded hardware, Palworld still isn't a great experience. Yes, averages are 90 FPS on lowest settings, but shoddy frame times. And then on the high preset, we're just around 30 FPS. This hardware is still not enough for this game on high settings. Phasmophobia shows anywhere between 50% to 90% better performance on lowest settings, but those harsh dips are still present. Going to high settings, at least we're at 60 FPS average, and those frame times are all right. Maybe slightly lower settings would make this smoother. I do typically like higher than 60 FPS for a consistently smooth experience, especially for a high refresh rate experience. On the new system in Valheim, and both lowest and high settings, it's very playable. I mean, 150 FPS could lead to a very smooth experience, and on high settings, 50 to 60 FPS, very smooth. I mean, averages could be higher, but at least those minimums are very good. Very nice. Finally, I overclocked the i7 6700K to 4.7 GHz. I really wanted 4.8, but I wasn't going to get that on this Intermax cooler. And I was even trying at 1.5 volts, but then that was giving me 100 degrees Celsius, as well as resulting in crashes. Probably lost the silicon lottery, so we'll settle to 4.7 GHz at 1.42 volts. It's fine, I guess. Lethal Company has slightly higher timings, or still GPU bound. Comparing the i7 plus GT 1030 with the i7 plus 1060, we can see a mild improvement in performance, but with the extra requirements of a better motherboard and cooler, you may as well be going with the non-K SKU, or just not overclocking. Because the K SKU still does have higher base and boost clocks. Oh, and you don't get overclocked Overwatch results, because it would crash me every time, resulting in a temp ban, so take that. Personally, I wouldn't overclock. There's not enough gains to contrast the higher power draw and potential for crashes. While the i7 helped in games like Overwatch, a better GPU is overall better for games, allowing for much higher settings. Now, there are much better CPUs and GPUs today, but if you're still on this level of hardware, you should still be fine. This hardware is from a nostalgic era. Many people got into PC gaming around this time. For me, I got into it a generation before. So this was my first look at a generational improvement over something like Haswell, bringing us 14 nanometer and DDR4 on the mainstream, as well as something like GTX 980 level performance for half the price. And AMD was starting to look competitive too, with the RX 480 and Zen right around the corner. This was a beautiful time for computer hardware and PC gaming. When did you get into computers and gaming and stuff? Let me know down below. And you can become a channel member if you join down below. For $5 a month, you can get exclusive content as well as some behind the scenes stuff. And you'll help contribute to grow YogertPC. So thanks for watching.